I like to give people the space to try new things
Have you ever had the imposter syndrome?
all the
Like,
time. All the time. The whole analogy is about like giving up your Legos. You're gonna want to take the jacket off. And I was like, oh, right, because it's so dangerous here. I'm wearing this jacket. It's gonna make me a target. And he's like, no, it's 40 degrees out. Like,
welcome back to my amazing chat with Mitch. If you missed the first part, please go check it out now. He first went through the environmental aspects of his career, and in the second part he's telling us more about his overall leadership experience. Let's go check it out. In general, like how would you rate it? Like how hard is it to be a manager?
I don't know. There's it. I would say that there's always going to be highs and lows in any job and in any role. I think that there can certainly be way more rewarding highs in in that role too. Like seeing someone implement a project for the first time and getting a positive customer satisfaction survey, and
Mhm.
having clients rant and rave about your team members is just like the most
Right.
rewarding thing. And then there's the other side of it too, where I think throughout my career being an individual contributor, you were sheltered a lot of the time too from sometimes there's going to be political things, sometimes there's going to be challenges with various leaders getting along, or company vision and organizational alignment, that it's just a different ball game.
Right.
And I think it is navigating those situations too can be much more challenging
Hmm.
sometimes too,
Yeah.
because even sometimes it, even if and feel that you're right, it's relationships, it's working with across the organization, and building foundational relationships that will enable your team to work well with other departments, to work well you know collaboratively, and that sometimes what the answer is. Sometimes what needs to be done, especially if it's something that you've done before, but you need to have another department see the same way as you.
Yeah.
You need to have another department kind of see what'll make the team successful, and what will be often best for your department as well.
Yeah.
So it's yeah, I would say sometimes it can be a lot more challenging in that respect. And I shouldn't say that there's like a certain personality or trait that makes anyone a successful leader, because there's so many different types of leaders, right? And
Hmm.
uh, all have their own merits too, of course. But it's been, yeah, I think at times it can, what will make you successful an individual contributor oftentimes I think might not make you a successful leader.
Yeah. And you talked about multiple styles, but what is your leadership style?
I think one of the things, I like to be a pretty hands-off leader in a lot of senses, and I think there's, I don't know, I think people that work with me might disagree with that too, but I I like to give people the space to try new things. I think that's the one thing, especially in this space, is so important, that we don't know the answers to any of these problems in this space. And the software world has so many tools, so many capabilities, so many things that can enable, like for us, the big thing is decarbonization and helping companies push towards, net zero, for example, that it, providing people with the space and capacity to experiment, try new things, see what works and what doesn't work, even a simple A/B test to figure out, will this work for us, is is something that I like to facilitate as much as possible. And providing those, especially those with ambition or drive to try new things, giving them the space to do it.
Hmm.
Like I think you know there's oftentimes seen as, and it's something that I think we've experienced in the past as well, that there's a recipe that's built, what a successful consultant looks like. And it's
Yeah.
like, okay, you have to do this on the project. You've got to do your QA checklist in a certain way. You've got to do everything else. And I think that is, you know, has a time and a place. And I think there's, especially in larger organizations, that is the right mesh and the right fit, and oftentimes, what kind of needs to be done. But one of the things that I've always loved to do is, say, hey, just try and iterate on this. Like, there's no right answer, for whatever it is, like the solution for the client, there is no right answer. Let's pull a team together and let's just brainstorm and try something new. And I think that's where, I've seen quite a few really successful tools, processes, and things come out of that free thinking brainstorming that I think is it kind of my style. I think especially for those that even when I was a solution architect, people would say I definitely shoot from the hip a lot, or, or it's like but if I think it can be fixed in production, let's just get it fixed.
Let's try.
That I think
What is
there's
the worst that can happen, right?
yeah, that I think that I don't know, and just to uh, provide a summary to like kind of like what is my style. I would say it's much more of you know trying, iterating, and being a bit yeah, fire from the hip when you need to.
I like what Mitch says a lot here. And if you don't know me very well, I'm a big fan of process improvement. You see, the goal of any company that are delivering some sort of project is to become more efficient with time. So you need to improve on your processes and how you're actually running those implementations. And what better way is there than just let your team figure it out and experiment? So I really appreciate when leaders say they are hands off, but in reality, a lot of people say that, but actually don't apply it. Anyway, let's continue watching. When you watch videos online and you read articles, there's often an association with, in order to be successful, you have to be a manager. You have to be a leader, right? And well, not everyone should be one, or not everyone wants to be one, really. But there are some people that may still want to become a manager in the future. So, what is your advice to those people if they're watching this video and they're thinking about it, maybe they're on the fence, what would you tell them?
Yeah. I would say think really hard about it too, because I think there's like I think a lot of people want to get into kind of the managerial role for what's seen as probably like the prestige or whatever else about it, and I think
Let's be real,
that
it's because of money.
yeah, but there are plenty of opportunities to like you know make as much, if not sometimes more than a manager in other roles. So there are IC roles that can do really, really well based on the skill set and what the person can provide to the organization. Like I think there's, you think about like various sales roles, you
Mhm.
know, again, individual contributor role that can make, quite a lot more than a manager if super successful. Um, and there's other opportunities too, like even think about like some of the engineering type
Mhm.
roles that worked with as well. That again, I think oftentimes, and it can come out that folks that are more competitive or whatever else are again pushing for that next step into the managerial role. I think there's a time and a place for it, and I think really hard about what you're successful at and what you're good at, sorry, and what you can turn into success for yourself, and whether that's something that you truly want to do. Are you someone that truly wants to work with others and have to play in those politic games sometimes? Because I know so many organizations will preach culture and whatever else, and I've totally seen places that are great at it, but I've seen places that are not great at it as well.
Right.
In my pretty short career in it too. You take this all with a grain of salt because of that as well. But I think there's, I think thinking really hard about if it's something that you really want to do is super important. Um, it, because yeah, the transition can be pretty challenging. And just knowing where you're getting into is pretty important.
Right. Yep. So during your career, I was actually curious. Have you ever had the imposter syndrome?
All the
Like,
time. All the time. It's like yeah, I think the the quote fake it till you make it and whatever else, like truly it definitely rings true for me too. Like there are definitely lots of times where it's like, okay, like, I even remember, I think it was my last leadership role where, you know, the team that I was managing was so fantastic. Like a ton of tenure. Um, we had people with PhDs on the team in like some of these subjects. It's like, okay, how can I, you know, teach you or tell you about like what a better way to implement or to build out something like you wrote the book on some of this stuff. Like
Yeah.
I feel like and just thinking about like and what I was offering to them too was not about like the subject matter expertise, but how to be and play in the software space, how to, work with, for example, the various vendors and software tools that we were implementing in a productive way, how to get the reactions or reactions probably not the right word, how to get the results that we wanted, for example, because we were working through like partnership organizations and stuff like that. So how to work productively with those software companies, realizing that we're a partner in the space, and realizing that, we're not the only partner, we're not the only customer, and helping them navigate some of those challenging situations. And it's like, oh yeah, I know this, I can do that.
Mhm.
And just kind of leaning on again the value and things that I could provide, knowing that I would never be more of a subject matter expert than
Yeah.
any of them.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, and then so we talked about your time as a consulting manager in general, but you became a director, and then you moved into a vice president position. Um, what do you like about being a leader? I think you kind of touched on that, but what do you really like and what do you dislike?
uh, I would say the biggest thing that I like is like building teams and seeing people grow and be successful is there's nothing like it. There's nothing as rewarding. I think about there's a consultant that we hired for this group, just came out of university, had a ton of ambition, a ton of drive. Um, and seeing him get promoted once, seeing him get promoted twice, seeing him like turn into this rock star consultant that he is just the has been like one of the most rewarding things I've seen
Mhm.
in my career, and just in multiple examples of kind of similar stories that have just been like that's the best part about the job is seeing people have those personal growth stories, those wins, those successes. Nothing like it. The thing that I would say can be really challenging is dealing with uh and and like it's not necessarily a bad like there's always going to be growing pains in an organization. There's always going to be challenging conversations and things that need to happen to determine it, especially and I'll say this is more something I've experienced in the startup world, um, as to like company vision and company growth. That, when you're going from a company that is 10 people to a company that's 100 people, there's another book that I read that I really like, and it's about like, and the whole analogy is about like giving up your Legos. That and I think like that analogy of like again giving up your Legos is super applicable because it kind of relates to almost being like toddlers and,
Right.
and kind of playing together. But that the analogy is that you have to build this tower together. And like when you were the person putting the Legos in, you're super efficient because you know exactly
Yeah.
where every Lego goes and you can do it. Now, you need to build instead of a tower, it's a castle.
Mhm.
And like it's no longer just you doing that. You need to loop in others and you need to give up those Legos and have them, you know, put them in the right spots. And it might not be the spot you would put it in, but you
Yeah.
need to be okay with that. And that analogy, and kind of the getting back to the point of, one of the things that can be really challenging in that role is knowing that you're going to have to basically be able to have that kind of giving up your Legos across the organization, and others can be giving up their Legos. And it can be very challenging
Mhm.
to navigate those personalities, relationships, and especially going through that growth within an organization.
Yeah.
That someone that is doing that process now is likely not going to do that for in the high growth industry for longer than 6 months. And
Right.
it might be challenging for them. It might be something that they continue to fall back on and say, hey, hey, this isn't done the way I would have done it, or hey, this is like looking a little different than what I've expected. And just being able to navigate that and say, you know, work through that with the organization and with individuals can be pretty challenging.
Yeah, I can see that. So now I'm going to ask you to put your VP hat. Uh, what are the main challenges of a services department?
In the SaaS space, it is always going to be navigating SaaS dollars and professional services dollars. I would say largely for valuation purposes.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that I have seen, I think, in every software company I've worked at, that there is there's a fine balance to it. But in large part, professional services can sometimes, if you have high professional services against your SaaS dollars, it can come across and it can appear that, your software is hard to implement,
Yep.
or that your consultants have to do a lot of work. And,
Mm-hmm.
it's not the best customer fit because you have to do all this configuration to meet the needs of your customers. When in reality, that's not always the case. And it's something I've seen shift a little bit more, that I think, especially financial organizations like VCs and PE are starting to see that there is a space for consulting. And there's a famous quote that I use all the time from one of our former VPs, is that, all money is green. That there is opportunity to include both, but there's definitely a balance that needs to be struck, because that is also true too, that if there is not a great product market fit, if for whatever reason, the tool does take a lot of work or
Mm-hmm.
need a lot of work in order to meet the needs of customers, that's going to be reflected in high professional services dollars. And being able to navigate those conversations and situations in a way that is beneficial and shows value to both the customer and to the organization, I would say is always, it's been a challenge throughout what I've seen, or just at least in the companies that uh, uh, past couple of companies I've worked in, and just finding a way to do that is successful, and again shows the value of the services and shows the value uh, that it can provide to the software is super important. And it's kind of the script or thing that's happened lately too, is that it's, seeing services as not only just getting them configured and in the platform, but also getting that value add
Mm-hmm.
afterwards.
Right.
So it's not just, using professional services to make sure the APIs are pulling in the correct data, and that, this field is built the way that we want to see it. But it's also that your professional services are used afterwards to help companies identify opportunities for, in our case, again, for environmental industry, you're using professional services to help them identify those decarbonization opportunities, to help them source, that example I said earlier about the VPPAs, that again, it's value add, and not just, you know, configuration implementation.
Sounds like you have your work cut out for yourself.
Yeah.
There's a lot that can be said about the value of a services department in an organization. And I like to categorize them in two simple ways: the value to the customer and the values to the organization that is selling the services. The value to the customer is that the people working in services are true expert of both the platform and the domain that they implement the platform for. So if you're a customer and deal with your vendors, I encourage you to rely on them and listen to their advice on how you should implement their solution. And if you're working for a SaaS company that are delivering some services, don't underestimate the value of the services people that are talking on a daily basis with your customers and can identify new leads and new opportunities for your organization. All right, let's resume watching. All right, I have a few general questions. In general, like, what makes a great team?
I I would say, like, and it sounds like a cop out answer, but I don't think it is. I would say passion for the work. Like, I think that's the one thing that I've been so impressed. And I think in the environmental space, it's really easy to get on board. And I think it's something that has been, like, so rewarding to work with teams, that it's like we all are working towards a common goal and mission. And the the group that I've worked with in this space over the past couple of companies that would have made them really successful is the folks that are saying like, hey, we have to do this work and we have to do it for the right reasons. And I'm super invested and super on board to see the success of my clients. And that kind of passion has really translated into strong deliverables that are going out the door to clients, happy customers and stuff like that, and all the metrics that you look for. But I think it's something more than that too. It's like we're all pushing towards this common goal and want to see customers succeed for the right reasons. And it's something it feels great to get behind, and like
Mhm.
seeing it and believing it, I think truly results in everything that you see in terms of the team being successful.
Yeah, that would not have been my answer, but that's interesting because you work in the environmental space, I've, and I've seen this space a little bit, and I agree with you. Like that space is full of passionate people, and the reason why they are working there is because they care about the environment.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
curious what your answer would have been.
I think I would have said values, but it's very similar to passion because you foster the values in a team that you share, right? So you all share the same values, which passion would be one of the values, right, that you share. But there are the other ones that I would have mentioned as well.
Yeah, yeah, no, oh, so true.
Um, that one is interesting. I had that question. What is the hardest conversation you've had as a leader?
Um, I'll give you two.
Oh, I'll take it.
I mean, always exiting employees is always, going to be the most difficult one. It's something that, no one will ever feel good about, and there's
Mhm.
no easy way to do it. There's no right way to do it. It's just, yeah, that's always challenging. I would say the second one, um, it would be around determining, you know, overall services vision and trying to sell kind of what I was mentioning earlier, like the value add within an organization.
Right.
But that is always it's such a challenging conversation. I think one that happens more and more within SaaS companies. Uh, it, and it feels, yeah, it feels challenging and difficult. And I think again, for the right reasons, everything that we were talking about earlier, where you're trying to basically find a way to say that this is going to be value add and that it's something that within the organization we need to do this
Mhm.
when you're bringing in revenue at the same time and
Mhm.
saying like this is again all money is green.
Yeah. um, so to lighten the mood a little bit, so you've traveled a lot for work. Can you share one travel story with us?
Sure. uh oh, this is a funny one. This is in I had to go to Mexico to visit a client site. And I was going to Mexico City, and my dad works in automotive, and I was reading all like the travel advisories and saying like how dangerous it was to go to Mexico at that time and whatever else. And it was like, oh, okay, so the company I was going to visit sent basically a security guard that would like follow me or like take me to the client site and whatever else and help me with whatever while I was there. And so I flew down there, and I was like, where I usually when I fly, I'll wear like a suit jacket and just like a shirt underneath or something, and
Right.
and dress like a little bit more formally, and walking out of the terminal, meet this guy, and it's like, okay, great. And he's like, oh, you're gonna want to take the jacket off. And I was like, oh, right, because it's so dangerous here. I'm wearing this jacket. It's gonna make me a target. And he's like, no, it's 40 degrees out. Like, take the jacket off. Yeah,
Oh,
that
oh,
was
that's funny.
funny.
Yeah. um, so as you know, a lot of project managers follow this channel, and so from your perspective of a VP in services, do you have an advice specific to project managers that might be watching and just want to improve what they're doing?
Yeah, I would say like good project managers can make such a huge impact and such a difference within the organization. The like a good project manager can be totally transformational for services. And I think the thing that a project manager does that can do really well is identify those opportunities for improvement, thinking specifically about implementation throughout any phase or any life cycle of the project, that they touch so many, usually so much more projects than a consultant does. And, they're always going to be your first line of defense for, raising risks and making sure that you're doing the appropriate resource allocation, all that kind of, again, bread and butter stuff that project managers need to do in order to be successful. But to me, the other thing is identifying opportunities for improvement, pulling them forward and actioning them. But I think there's a lot of times where it's like, oh, we could do that differently. And it's like, that seems like, it just kind of falls out into the ether. That I think what makes a really strong project manager, someone that is able to bring that forward, say, here's what I think the solution is, and then action it.
Mhm.
And then start to pull together, the new resources, the new tools, the new guides, whatever it might be that we can start using on projects. But I think, it because you have as a PM, you've got the opportunity to touch so many different projects, different parts of projects. Again, you've got a much broader lens on what you're seeing. And real successful PMs are always looking for that next opportunity to improve that process and then bring it to the rest of the team.
Yeah. And I would add, like, if you're a PM and watching things and say, oh, that's a great idea, I would add that it's also fun and it will grow your career. So that's a good
Yeah,
advice.
yeah, 100%.
Um, all right. So we're touching to the end of the interview, but there are two more things we need to do. The first one is you prepared a question for me. So let's
Yes,
hear it.
yes. And it's something I ask all PMs during the interview process.
Oh,
I, I
perfect.
think
Very
I think
fitting.
what yeah, I think what makes a good PM to me is what I'll call like war stories, where, especially when you're going through like a really challenging and difficult project with a team, that there's always that one project you can think back on, oh, at least it's not this project, or at least it's not that project. And you've always kind of got that, almost that positive outlook because you're like, oh, I've been in worse. I
Mhm.
would love to hear what your war story is. And of course, you don't have to name clients or anything like that. But yeah, what is your war story?
Um, yeah, I have a few, but there is one that comes to mind immediately. Um, it was a large customer that we were implementing. We had a large team to implement it, multiple consultants, solution architects, um, and a large budget. And it was a long project. We were already 1 year into the project, and we were on their second phase. So we already deployed some applications, and we were live, and everybody was happy. The second phase went a bit longer than they expected, but there were limitations in the platform. So we were already managing escalations, but nothing too bad. And then came go live day, and we deployed the solution. And we thought we did a great job, clapped hand, like everybody was happy, high fives all around. But the next day we started receiving like really angry emails from the customer. And that's because when we deployed the basically the phase two applications, so the second and third applications, we broke everything else. Nothing was working. So we had to immediately roll back the system to a few days ago. So we lost data, we lost a lot of things there just by the rollback. And then we basically, the customer asked us to put the project on pause, to do a full investigation of what happened, which we were able to identify really quite quickly what happened. And it was just an oversight, a mistake in the design of the application that we could have fixed quickly. But instead of going that route, they asked us to revamp the whole thing. So during about a month, there were a lot of conversations about what we should do. And because of this whole analysis and the disruption that it made, a lot of people got involved and a lot of, emotional conversations where people were angry. And we got to resume the project by redesigning everything, basically, because there were also a lot of things that we didn't do because of limitation, but now we had to do. We messed up, so we had to fix everything, not just that one thing. And of course, everything was done for free. So for the next 6 months, we worked for free, delivering that project with a lot of people. But all in all, it wasn't that traumatic experience, as bad as it sounds, because the customer after that was really happy with us. And even though we did a lot of work for free, I think we saved that customer, and now I believe they're still with that company and still implementing more solutions with them. So I think overall it was quite successful.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. There's always a second part to that question too, and it was like, what did you learn and what would you have done next time?
I think it's kind of what you said. When you pass on your Legos, it can go wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, for
um,
sure.
no, I think what I learned from that time is some things sometimes things go wrong, and you shouldn't sweat it too much. I mean, work is work, and it's not everything in your life. And yes, it will be difficult, but you can always bounce back. And I think it's not worth, losing sleep over it, or really like ruining your mental health. That's a big lesson for me. It's like I spent a lot of time working during that time, and with looking back, it's like, yeah, I think it was worth it, because at the end the customer was happy. But it was it really, like I remember suffering a little bit because I was just working too much. I have one colleague that went on stress leave during that time because of it. Um,
Oh wow.
so it did have an impact on people's health, and that part is probably not okay. So I would not recommend. It's okay to work a little bit harder from time to time, or because there is a crunch period, but you shouldn't do it for a long period of time.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's the nature of our industry too, like professional service, there's always going to be ebbs and flows and busy periods and a bit of downtime. And I think it's yeah,
Yeah,
not making sure those busy periods don't stretch out to, anything longer than a month.
yeah, exactly. Um, all right, the next part of this interview is I have a question from my previous guest. So I ask every guest to provide to me a question, and then I read it out to my next one. So I have a question from my previous one that I will read aloud now for you. Um, oh, that's interesting. What's the most memorable thing you witnessed at a company event?
uh, uh, good memorable, bad memorable.
This is your question.
There's options. Oh boy. I'll take the high road and pick one that's a good thing to talk about. No, there's one company event we used to have like golf tournaments and stuff like that, and one person brought their partner who was like a crazy good golfer, and like ended up winning like all of the prizes. So like basically won, you know, longest drive, closest to the pin, like best score, everything. And like by the end it was like almost embarrassed to go up and like win his prizes. So yeah, I'll use that one.
And that's a politically correct answer.
Yes.
All right. Um, that was my last question. Before I let you go, is there anything else that you would like to share, maybe with our viewers?
uh no, just I mean if anyone's interested in the industry, getting into environmental sustainability, um SaaS in general, feel free to find me on LinkedIn, contact me in any way. Always happy to talk to folks, and if there's any way I can help, just let me know.
Mitch is hiring.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. It was an absolute pleasure. I hope you enjoyed it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Have a good night.
You too. Take care.
Bye. This was the Diary of a PM. I hope you really enjoyed this conversation with Mitch as much as I did. If you would like to see more contents like this, please feel free to check out the other interviews that I made with Rob and Jonah. And as usual, make sure to follow, leave a like or a comment. These things really help the channel. Merci and au revoir.